The author said, may Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala have mercy upon him. قال المؤلف رحمه الله فمما يجب علمه واعتقاده مطلقا. And so, among what its knowledge and its conviction is obligatory. So knowing it and believing in it is obligatory. مطلقا, absolutely. وَالنُّطْقُ بِهِ فِي الْحَالِ, and among which is obligatory is pronouncing it immediately. إِنْ كَانَ كَافِرًا, if one were a blasphemer. وَإِلَّا فَفِي الصَّلَاةِ, or else, if he's not a blasphemer, then he's obligated to say it in the prayer. الشهادتان, it's the shahada. That's among what's obligatory to know and to believe in and to pronounce. وَهُمَا أَشْهَدُ أَن لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, يعني the two shahadas. It's the two shahadas. And they are أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Those are the two shahadas. That means I testify or I witness that no one is God but Allah, and I witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. الشرح, the explanation. أن أول ما يجب على الإنسان المكلف معرفة الله ومعرفة رسوله, is that the first of what is obligatory on the accountable person is knowing Allah and knowing His Messenger. وَالنُّطْقُ بِذَلِكَ مَرَّةً وَاحِدَةً إِنْ كَانَ كَافِرًا, and pronouncing that once, if one were a blasphemer. Yani, pronouncing it to get out of blasphemy. وَمَنْ حَصَلَ مِنْهُ ذَلِكَ مَعَ الِاعْتِقَادِ الْجَازِمِ, and whoever that occurs from him, whoever does that with firm conviction, فَهُوَ مُسْلِمٌ مُؤْمِنٌ, then he is a Muslim believer. ثُمَّ لَا يَكْمُلُ إِيمَانُهُ وَإِسْلَامُهُ إِلَّا بِأَدَاءِ الْوَاجِبَاتِ وَاجْتِنَابِ الْمُحَرَّمَاتِ, then his faith and his religious practice will not be excellent except by fulfilling the obligations and avoiding the prohibitions. ثم اختلف العلماء في وجوب النطق بالشهادتين بعد تلك المرة. Furthermore, the scholars have differed about the obligation of pronouncing the two shahadas after that one time. وأكثر العلماء على وجوب النطق بالشهادتين في كل صلاة. Most scholars are of the opinion of the obligation of pronouncing the two shahadas in every prayer. وقال مالك في أحد قوليه بعدم وجوب النطق بالشهادتين في الصلاة. And Malik said, according to one of two sayings of his, that it is not obligatory to pronounce the two shahadas in the prayer. حيث إن التشهد عنده في الصلاة سنة, because the tashahhud, or what they call the tahiyyat, according to him in the prayer is recommended. ليس فرضا, not obligatory. ليس فرضا من فروض الصلاة, it's not one of the obligatory parts of the prayer. أي على الراجح المشهور في المذهب, meaning according to what is famous and preponderance according to that school. Famous means most widespread, doesn't mean most correct. Al-Qawl al-Mashhur is the famous saying. You find it in all the books, or most of them. Doesn't mean that it's Al-Qawl al-Sahih or Al-Qawl al-Rajih, the correct saying or the preponderant saying. But here Sheikh says that according to the Maliki school, for the tashahhud to not be obligatory is the preponderant and famous saying of the school. ثم إن النطق الذي يجب على الكافر يحصل بلفظ أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمد رسول الله. Furthermore, indeed the pronunciation that is obligatory upon the blasphemer happens by uttering أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمد رسول الله باللغة العربية in Arabic language وبترجمته and by its translation لغيرها into another language لغيرها من اللغات, like to say, I testify that there is no God but Allah, and I testify that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. وقال بعض الشافعية, and some Shafi'is said, إن كان يعرف النطق بالعربية لا ينطق بغيرها. If one knows how to pronounce in Arabic, then he does not, he must not pronounce by another language. وهو غير معتبر, and this saying is disregarded. فمن كان أعجميا يقول أن محمدا يقال له قل أن أبا القاسم رسول الله. And so whoever was not an Arab saying Muhammad without a ha, not Muhammad, he was saying, instead of saying Muhammad, he said with a ha, Muhammad, for example, then it is said to him, say that Abu al-Qasim is the messenger of Allah. So what's the issue there? He's not pronouncing the ha, letter ha. Muhammad, very important. Many non-Arabs want to be Muslims and say the shahada. They believe in Allah and His messenger. If you meet someone who needs to learn, I would advise you, and I do myself, if I meet someone, let's say I met someone in the street or on the train, he's a Muslim, and I'm talking to him, then I would advise him to say the shahada, even in English, just to fix these words. So just to give you an example, 2 of these on the train. I met a guy, and subhanallah, I was afraid he's a crazy guy, sweating bullets. They don't know what's wrong with him. But he didn't do anything strange. And I talked to him, and he wants to be a believer, and he's a Muslim, and he loves Islam. So I told him, and he was liking what I was saying to him. So I told him, now say this, say the shahada, say this like this, to make sure your pronunciation of shahada is correct. And inshallah, you'll die with correct shahada, pronunciation and belief. So he did so. They don't have a problem. Usually, I never had someone who has a problem if he's listening to what I'm saying. I recently also met another man. He's older fellow, has like a walker to help him walk. And he was happy to see me, a Muslim. So I talked to him, and then I did the same thing for him. MashaAllah. So am I saying that he never said the shahada properly and he's not a Muslim? I'm not saying that. But just I'm concerned, so that's what I do, and that's what I advise you to do. You will help some Muslims, and who knows the reward for that? Allah knows. So Sheikh says, whoever was not Arab saying Muhammad, for example, without the ha, then let him say Abu al-Qasim with the letter qaf, ka. Like it's basically C-A-U in English, caution. You know how to say caution? Abu al-Qasim. Ka. And then even if you say Gasim, ga with a G, Abu al-Gasim, that's valid. وَإِذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ يَأْتِي بِهَاءِ لَفْظِ الْجَلَالَةِ Allah فَيَكْفِي تَرْجُمَتُهُ بِلُغَتِهِ. And if one was saying the name of Allah without a ha, So he says, Allah, and that's so many English speakers. Allah, they say. And as for the Arabs, it sounds like they say worse. They say Allah. They drop the alif and the ha. English speakers, I hear them, they say the alif, they don't say the ha. Allah. And Arabs, it's so surprising, they say Allah. That's haram either way. فَيَكْفِي تَرْجُمَتُهُ بِلُغَتِهِ. Then it would be sufficient for a person to translate the name of the creator in his own language. So he could say God. He could say, for example, no one deserves worship but God. And Muhammad or Abul Qasim or Abul Qasim is the messenger of God. وإن كان لا يستطيع أن ينطق بما قبل لفظ الجلالة فينطق به مترجما. And if he's unable to say the words that come before the name of Allah in the Shahadah, then let him say them translated. So what he's saying is, you could say La ilaha illa God, you can translate it. And if you can't say the words before the name of God, then translate those two. ولا يشترط خصوص هذا اللفظ. And this particular expression is not a condition. بل يكفي ما يعطي معناه. Rather, sufficient is what gives its meaning. كأن يقول, like to say, لا رب إلا الله, there's no Lord but Allah. أو لا خالق إلا الله, or there's no creator but Allah. ويكفي محمد نبي الله, and sufficient is to say Muhammad is the prophet of Allah instead of messenger. لكن لفظ أشهد أفضل من سائر الألفاظ. However, the expression أشهد, I testify, is better than other expressions, meaning to say the Shahada incorporating the word أشهد into it. لأن أشهد لها امتياز على أعلم وأعرف ونحو ذلك من الألفاظ. Because the word أشهد has a merit over أعلم, I know, or أعرف, I know, or I'm aware, I'm familiar, or something to that extent, or to that meaning. And the likes of those expressions, أشهد, I testify, it's better. وهو أنه يتضمن معناها اللغوي, and that is that the word أشهد, its linguistic meaning incorporates العلم والاعتقاد والاعتراف. It incorporates the meaning of knowledge and conviction and confession, which is admission, that means verbal admission. واشتراط بعض الشافعية لفظ أشهد عند النطق بالشهادتين للدخول في الإسلام مردود وباطل. And some Shafi'is making it a condition to pronounce the word ashhadu in the shahadatain, in the two shahadas, for entering into Islam is rejected and invalid. وَمَنْ اعْتَقَدَهُ لَا يَكْفُرُ. And whoever believes that does not blaspheme, that saying ashhadu is a condition for embracing Islam. Sheikh says, who believes that does not blaspheme. لأنهم يفهمون أن لفظ أشهد فيه معنى زائد. Because they understand that the word ashhadu has an additional meaning. وقد تركه الذي يريد دخول في الإسلام عمدا مع القدرة على النطق به. And that the one who wants to embrace Islam is leaving that out while able to pronounce it. What's that extra meaning though? I don't know what that means. That it has an extra meaning. That part's not clear for me. واشترط بعضهم التركيب للشهادتين عند النطق بهما. And some have made it a condition when pronouncing the shahada to keep the two shahadas in order, the first one, then the second one. And that's also not a condition. وَمَنْ قَالَ أَشْهَدُ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ بِلَا إِدْغَامٍ صَحَّتْ شَهَادَتُهُ. And whoever said, La ilaha illallah, and whoever said, Ashhadu an la, these two words here, without blending them. Instead of saying Allah, he says an la. Whoever says an la, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, without fusing those two words together, صحت شهادته. His shahada is valid. أما الذي يقول, as for who says, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله, I testify that لا إله إلا الله, لم تصح شهادته, then his shahada is not valid. لأن هذا كلام مبتور, because this is a fragment, not a complete sentence. كمن قال, like the one who said, أشهد أن زيدا, I testify that Zayd وسكت من غير أن يأتي بالخبر, and then he went silent without the rest of the sentence, the predicate. So here, what does that footnote say there? Okay. So the issue here is not showing up in the translation so much. So you say, Ashhadu an, about a shadda there, not anna. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. So when we translate that, you'd say, I testify that no one is God but Allah. Here's with the shadda, anna. Also, if we translate it, the translation comes out the same. I testify that no one is God but Allah. But in the Arabic, that's different. When you say, Ashhadu an, without a shadda there, the real meaning is, as they say, at the end of the day, the meaning is, Ashhadu bi annahu, Ashhadu bi annahu. I testify that the issue is that La ilaha illallah, no one is God but Allah. So that's a complete sentence. I testify that the issue is that no one is God but Allah. That's the meaning when you say Ashhadu an La ilaha illallah bi annahu. I testify that the issue is that no one is God but Allah. Period. So that's a complete sentence. But when you say anna, ashhadu anna la ilaha illallah, all that you're saying is, I testify that no one is God but Allah is ... So that's incomplete sentence. So it's not valid then. So you can't say, ashhadu anna la ilaha illallah. That's not valid shahada. وَمَنْ عَجَزَ عَنِ النُّطْقِ بِاللِّسَانِ, and whoever is unable to pronounce with his tongue, يَكْفِيهِ إِيمَانُهُ بِالْقَلْبِ, then his heart's faith is sufficient for him. لِأَنَّ بَعْضَ النَّاسِ مِنْ شِدَّةِ أَلَمِ سَكَرَاتِ الْمَوْتِ, because some people, from the intensity of the pains, of the throes of death, الَّذِي هُوَ أَشَدُّ مِنْ أَلْفِ ضَرْبَةٍ بِالسَّيْفِ, that pain which is more intense than 1,000 stabs of a sword. أَعْصَابُهُمْ تَسْتَرْخِي, their limbs, their nerves go limp. Their nerves go limp. فَلَا تُطَاوِعُهُمْ لِسَانُهُمْ عَلَى النُّطْقِ, and so their tongues will not obey them to pronounce. إِلَّا بَعْضَ عِبَادِ اللَّهِ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ وَغَيْرِهِمْ, except some slaves of Allah who are pious, and except some others that are not pious. So, subhanallah, wallahi, these days I've been thinking about this. remembering death. But what does it mean, Yani? Remembering death? What's so scary about it? Yani, let's say even you're going to be in paradise. Let's say you're a wali. You saw the Prophet in your dream. You made people embrace Islam. You recited Ayatul Kursi after every salah. Everything you knew, everything you learned, that is its reward is that you will enter paradise. You did it, let's say. And you're not going to even be tortured in the afterlife. Just this here, the throes of death is so painful. Isn't that scary? And not just that, that's the throes of death. What the Sheikh is talking about here means you still have a stable life. Here, you still have a stable life when you're in the throes of death. How we know that? That's what he's talking about, because he's saying that the Shahadah is valid at this time. The Shahadah is still valid at this time. But some people will be in so much pain that they can't speak. And then what about when the angel's actually pulling your soul out? And then your soul is ripping away from every single part of your body, down to the tips of your fingers. Yani, to your cuticles. Oh, down to the cuticles. You know, the cuticle? Right there where your fingernail and your skin touch. The soul is mixed in everything. And it's ripping away. And now add to that if you deserve to be punished by Allah. Subhanallah. He said, did you say that the one who is in the pains of death, if he struggled to utter due to the throes of death and he did need to embrace Islam, it would be valid for him even if he doesn't speak? That's what the Shaykh is saying here. Yes. I'll repeat for you. He said, when is the door of repentance closed before death? The door of repentance itself is closed when the sun rises from the west. As for the person as an individual, there's cases when his shahada won't be accepted. Maybe the Sheikh's going to come to that. If he doesn't, and then I don't remember, just remind me. But that's what the Sheikh's saying. Let me repeat. What's he talking about here? If we follow the context, or else, Yani. I'm glad you asked that, because Yani, one might doubt, is that the case? Is that what the Sheikh's saying? But that's what he's saying. Sometimes we might hear something and we're not believing our own ears. So be careful there. I remind myself that's a real thing. And then you'll be confused for something that really it's there and it's clear and it was said right there in your face. I'm not blaming you, brother. That happens to any person, maybe, yani most of, or lots of people. And then that could be a door for the whispers too. When something is there stated, and then you won't, not you, someone won't submit to what's clearly right there in his face. So let's see, what did the Shaykh say here? He's talking about embracing Islam. The pronunciation that's obligatory on the kafir happens by saying the Shahadah. And then he goes and he says, if he says Muhammad, he has to, then let him say Abul Qasim. And if he can't say Allah with the ha, let him translate it. And he doesn't have to say that particular statement that we started with. He could say Rabb, Lord, or Khaliq, Creator, instead of Ilah, God. And he can say Nabi instead of Rasul. Still the same context. The person is embracing Islam. But saying Ashhadu is better. And then some of the Shafi'is, they said you have to say Ashhadu to embrace Islam, and that's rejected. And some of them said you have to keep the Shahada and the two Shahadas in order. And what's correct is that you don't have to. And if someone said Anla without merging these two, it's still valid. But if he says Ashhadu anna la ilaha illallah, it's not valid. It's not valid. His Shahada is not valid. It means he didn't embrace Islam. And whoever was unable to pronounce with his tongue, then it's enough for him to believe in his heart. We're not talking about the prayer here. There's only two cases we're addressing here. Either you're saying the shahada in the prayer, or you're saying the shahada to embrace Islam. We're not talking about the adhan. We're not talking about a dhikr circle. Whoever was unable to pronounce with his tongue, then it's sufficient for him to believe in his heart to embrace Islam. Because some people, from the intensity of the pains of the throes of death, that's worse than 1,000 stabs of a sword, their nerves go limp and their tongues do not obey them. So that's what the Shaykh is saying here. Barakallahu fikum. That's a good question. وَيَصِحُّ إِسْلَامُ مَنْ قَالَ أَشْهَدُ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ بِنَصْبِ مُحَمَّدًا وَرَسُولٍ. It's valid for a person to embrace Islam, still the same context. It's valid for a person to embrace Islam that he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulallah, with fatha there, Rasula. Binasbi Muhammadan wa Rasul, with a fatha on Muhammad and Rasul. لأنه حصل منه وصف محمد بالرسالة, because by this sentence, although it's a blunder, he is linguistically confirming messengership for Muhammad. وإن كان من حيث اللغة كلاما مبتورا, even though linguistically this is a fragment, because it means I testify that no one is God but Allah, and I testify that Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, is ... So it's confirming messengership for Muhammad, although it's a fragment. So his Islam is valid. إلا عند من أثبت جواز نصب اسم إن وأن وخبرهما. Except, it's not a fragment according to those who confirm the validity, the permissibility, the validity of both. I'm just going to say here, it's not a very exact translation, both the subject and the predicate in this case of inna to have a fatha or to be mansub, like what we said here. Some said, no, that's a valid dialect. You can talk like that. So according to that, then it's not a fragment. So either way, it's valid. But according to one way, which is the famous way, but according to one way, which is the famous way, it's a fragment. And according to another way, which is a weak way, poor Arabic, it's poor Arabic, but not wrong, then it's not a fragment. Either way, it's valid. ذكر ذلك السيوطي في جمع الجوامع في النحو. السيوطي mentioned that in جمع الجوامع, his book جمع الجوامع, in grammar, نحو, or syntax. So now the Shaykh's not going to mention that. So for a person, an individual, his embracing Islam will not be valid when he's sure that he's going to die, like the Pharaoh who was drowning, or when the soul reaches the throat, or upon seeing the angel of death. Although those two, I don't know how they got separated. I haven't learned how they got separated, but we did learn those two. Upon seeing the angel of death, then it's too late. Or when the soul reaches the throat, the clavicle, when the soul reaches the clavicle, then it's too late. So does the soul reach the clavicle without the angel pulling it? If so, then that's clear. But if the soul doesn't reach the clavicle without the angel pulling it, then I don't know how they got separated. We can ask, inshallah. Now, قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, ومعنى أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أعلم وأعتقد بقلبي وأعترف بلساني ألا معبود بحق إلا الله. The author, may Allah have mercy upon him, said, the meaning of I testify that no one is God but Allah is I know, I hold his conviction in my heart, and I confess with my tongue that there is none worshipped rightfully but Allah. Subhanallah. I just remembered something here. So this is what the Shaykh says. That La ilaha illallah means is no ma'bud but Allah. And Al-Ash'ari said, La ilaha illallah means La khaliqa illallah. Because he said Al-Ilah means the one who has ilahiyah. So La ilaha illallah, no one is ilah but Allah, would mean no one has ilahiyah, godhood, but Allah. Al-Ash'ari said ilahiyah means the power to create. Therefore, La ilaha illallah means no one has the power to create but Allah. And then from there you say, and the one who has the power to create is the one who deserves worship. So according to that, then it's like the Shaykh skipped a step, because Al-Ash'ari is saying the ma'bud is the one who creates, and the one who creates is the one who has ilahiyah. But now, that's one way. But what does ilah mean in language? Ilah means ma'luh, worshipped. Ma'bud. Ma'luh means ma'bud. La ilaha illallah means la ma'luha illallah. Ma'luh means ma'bud. La ma'buda bihaqqin illallah. So, mashallah. So, maybe the Shaykh didn't skip a step there. Even though Ash'ari said different in wording. At the end, it's the same, but in the beginning and in the wording, Al-Ash'ari said something that leads to what the Shaykh says. What the Shaykh said doesn't need a preparation if ilah means ma'luh. So I think that's clear. Anyway, Ash-Sharh, the explanation. أن المعرفة إذا كانت بلا اعتقاد لا تنفع, is that knowledge or awareness, familiarity, if it is without conviction in this subject, then it does not benefit. Knowledge without conviction in this issue does not benefit. Allah Ta'ala anzala wasfa Sayyidina Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam وذكر رسالته في التوراة وفي الإنجيل المنزلين على موسى وعيسى. Allah, exalted is He, revealed the description of our sire Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and mentioned his messengership or his message in the Torah and the Injil that were both revealed to Moses and Jesus respectively. اليهود كانوا يعرفون أن نبينا محمدا نبي رسول. The Jews were aware that our Prophet Muhammad is a prophet, messenger. بما عرفوا من التوراة من وصف محمد بالرسالة, because of what they knew from the Torah of describing Muhammad with the message or messengership. وكذلك في الإنجيل, likewise in the Injil, قال تعالى, said God Almighty, يعرفونه كما يعرفون أبناءهم. They are familiar with him like they are familiar with their own children or their own sons. ومع ذلك يكذبونه ويكفرون به. Despite that, they contradict him and they disbelieve in him. It means they don't accept what they know. A person might know something without accepting it. ومعنى أشهد يتضمن الاعتقاد لذلك الشرع. ومعنى أشهد يتضمن الاعتقاد, period. And the meaning of أشهد incorporates conviction. لذلك الشرع اختار الشهادة أي اختار أشهد بدل أعلم أو أعرف. For that reason, the sacred law selected the word shahada for this testimony. Meaning, the sacred law selected ashhadu, saying ashhadu, I testify, instead of a'lamu, I know, or a'rifu, or I'm aware, or I'm familiar. وَالْإِلَهُ مَنْ لَهُ الْإِلَهِيَّةِ. And the ilah is who has ilahiyah. Well, there the Shaykh defined it like how Al-Ash'ari defined it. So if his definition of that is the same as Al-Ash'ari's definition, then up here it's like he skipped the step. وَهِيَ الْقُدْرَةُ عَلَى الْإِخْتِرَاعِ. And it is the power to create. This word ikhtira' means, in a more literal sense, to invent. To invent. It is the power to invent, which means here to create. أي إبراز الأشياء من العدم إلى الوجود, meaning manifesting things, يعني manifesting substance with qualities from nothingness into existence. وَمَعْنَى قَوْلِ الْفُقَهَاءِ. And the meaning of the saying of the jurists, لَا مَعْبُودَ بِحَقٍّ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. There is none rightfully worshipped but Allah. أي لا يستحق أحد أن يعبد أي أن يتذلل له نهاية التذلل إلا الله. Meaning, no one deserves to be worshipped, meaning no one deserves to be receiving the subservience, the subservience, meaning the ultimate subservience, but Allah. كما قال بذلك الإمام الحافظ الفقيه اللغوي تقي الدين علي بن عبد الكافي السبكي. As said by, meaning as defined by, the Imam and the Hadith headmaster and the jurist and the linguist Taqiyuddin, whose name is Ali, the son of Abdul Kafi as-Subki. وغيره, and others, they said it too. كأبي منصور, يعني others said that definition of worship, that it is the ultimate submission, but not just with these words though. They said what means this in various ways. نهاية التذلل is the same as saying غاية الخضوع والخشوع. Like Abu Mansur في كتاب تهذيب اللغة, like Abu Mansur in the book تهذيب اللغة. Look at that, it has several volumes. I don't know, is that a dictionary? Inshallah, I'll take a look in that book, تهذيب اللغة. وابن منظور صاحب كتاب لسان العرب, and also was said by Ibn Manzur, author of the book Lisan al-Arab, the tongue of the Arabs. That's a dictionary on the verge of being an encyclopedia. Wal-Farra, also Al-Farra said so. وَلَفْظُ السُّبْكِي, and the expression of السُّبْكِي is العبادة أقصى غاية الخشوع. العبادة أقصى غاية الخشوع والخضوع. He said worship is the extent, the furthest extent. أقصى غاية, أقصى means furthest, غاية means extent or limit. It is the furthest extent of khushu', which is humility, and khudu', which is humbleness or subservience. ذكر ذلك الإمام اللغوي الحافظ محمد مرتضى الزبيدي. The Imam and the linguist and the Hadith headmaster Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi mentioned that. في شرح القاموس, in the explanation of the dictionary Al-Qamus. وممن فسر العبادة بذلك أيضا, and amongst those who explained worship like that also is الراغب الأصبهاني. الراغب الأصبهاني وهو لغوي مشهور, and he is a famous linguist. يكثر النقل عنه صاحب شرح القاموس محمد مرتضى الزبيدي. The author of Al-Qamus, Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi, frequently copies from him, Al-Raghib al-Asbahani. قال في تأليفه مفردات القرآن, he said in his work, مفردات القرآن, the vocabulary of the Quran, العبادة غاية التذلل, worship is the extent of humility or debasement. And this Al-Raghib al-Asbahani, subhanallah, the very little that I've seen while working on tafsir of Quran from time to time, referring to this book, Mufradatul Quran, yani, is superb, so beneficial. I'd like to just order a hard copy of the book and enjoy reading it, inshaAllah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And this book it's a dictionary of Quranic words, not just a dictionary of Arabic language. It's very useful for a translator. I should be using it more often. وقد قال الحافظ السيوطي عن السبكي إنه حافظ فقيه أصولي لغوي نحوي متكلم. And Hafiz as-Suyuti said about as-Subki, indeed, he is a hadith headmaster, and he is a jurist, and he is a scholar of the fundamentals, usuli. I'm curious though about what's all included under being an usuli. Means usul fiqh or means more than that, like mustalah also. I'd like to ask about that. And he's a linguist, and he's a grammarian. Linguist means he knows the meanings of words. Grammarian means he knows syntax. And he's a theologian. وَقَالَ الذَّهَبِيُّ فِيهِ, and al-Dhahabi said about him, and he's someone that the Wahhabis like. ليهنى المنبر الأموي لما علاه الحاكم البحر التقي شيوخ العصر أحفظهم جميعا وأخطبهم وأقضاهم علي. That first word, I'm not sure what it means. But by the context, he's saying something to the effect of that the pulpit, the Umayyad pulpit, yani the minbar in the masjid, the Umayyad masjid, when the wise sea of knowledge, Taqiyuddin, ascends the pulpit. That word there, that's a blank for me though. Something nice when he goes up there. He's the sheikh of the time, the most memorizing, or might mean the greatest hadith scholar of all of them. And the one who has the best khutbahs, give the best speeches, or is the most eloquent speaker. And the judge of the judges is Ali. That's his name, Ali Taqiyuddin as-Subki. ولو كان معنى العبادة مطلق الطاعة لمخلوق في أي شيء طاعة أو معصية, and had the meaning of worship been absolute obedience, unrestricted obedience to a creation in anything, whether it's obedience or disobedience, لكان عمال الحكام الجائرين كفارا, then all of the workers or agents of the rulers, the unjust rulers, the tyrants, all of them, they would be blasphemers. Just for working under these unjust rulers and obeying them. They would have been blasphemers for obeying them. They would have been mushriks, pagans. They would have been their worshippers because they obeyed them. فهل يقول هؤلاء الذين يكفرون أيضا المتوسلين بالأنبياء والأولياء في هؤلاء العمال إنهم مشركون? Question mark. So would those who also deem as blasphemers the people who make tawassul by the prophets and the saints, would they call those workers, those government workers, pagans for obeying their unjust authorities? أليس هؤلاء أنفسهم يطيعون الحكام في بعض المعاصي? Isn't it that some of those themselves obey the rulers in some sins? Those Wahhabi clerics, don't some of those Wahhabi clerics obey their authorities in unlawful matters? They do. Look at that expansion of the Mas'a and Hajj. فعلى مقتضى قولهم يكونون حكموا على أنفسهم بالكفر. So according to their own saying, they have judged themselves with blasphemy. وَهَؤُلَاءِ هُمُ الْوَهَّابِيَّةِ, and those, they are the Wahhabis, the wobblers, as some call them. أتباع Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, the followers of Muhammad, the son of Abdul Wahhab. كفروا أنفسهم وإن لم يشعروا. They deemed themselves as kuffar even if they didn't realize it, because of their definition of worship. فهؤلاء الذين يكفرون المستغيثين فهؤلاء الذين يكفرون المستغيثين بالأولياء والأنبياء. So those who deem as blasphemers the people who seek the help of saints and prophets. ليتعلموا معنى العبادة في لغة العرب قبل إطلاق ألسنتهم بالتكفير. Let them learn the meaning of worship in the language of the Arabs before letting their tongues loose with charges of blasphemy. وهذا معنى العبادة المرادة بقوله تعالى, and this is the meaning of worship that's meant in the saying of God Almighty, لا إله إلا أنا فاعبدون. No one is God but so worship me. Surah Al-Anbiya, ayah 25. وَبِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى, and also that's what's meant by his saying, exalted is he. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, you we worship. The fifth ayah of Al-Fatiha. Iyaka is you. It means like anta, but it's receiver of the verb. Iyaka, you, na'bud, we worship. So it doesn't mean here, this ayah, it is you whom we worship. Yani, not really like that. It has that meaning, but it's not like that. You we worship, meaning we worship you, but put the you in the front. وهذه هي العبادة المختصة لله تعالى, and this is the worship that is special for Allah. Exalted is He. التي من صرفها لغيره صار مشركا, that worship which if someone directed it towards other than Allah, he became a pagan. وليس معناها مجرد النداء, its meaning is not merely calling or calling upon someone, or calling upon someone, أو الاستعانة أو الاستغاثة, nor is its meaning merely seeking help from someone, أو الخوف, or being afraid of someone, أو الرجاء, or having hope for something from someone. None of that means you worshiped that one. كما زعم بعض الناس, like how some people erroneously claimed. أن مجرد نداء شخص ميت أن مجرد نداء شخص ميت أو غائب شرك, that merely calling someone who died or calling someone who's absent is paganism. So according to that, it means if someone went to the cemetery to visit his dead loved one, and then he cried and said, oh, my loved one, right there he's a pagan. He worshipped that one because he called him and he's dead. So that's Wahhabi belief. And no one believes that in any religion. Only Wahhabis believe that. وَكَذَلِكَ اسْتِعَانَتُهُ بِهِ إِلَّا بِالْحَيِّ الْحَاضِرِ. Likewise, for someone to seek help from another, unless he's alive and present, that's not a condition, or else it's going to be shirk, that if you seek someone's help, he has to be alive. And he has to be present, not absent, somewhere else. This part about being alive is a big confusion for Wahhabis, because what's the source of that confusion? How come it's hard to convince them here that you're not worshiping someone if you sought his help while he's dead? Because they don't have a right belief in miracles of prophets and karamas of awliya. They're empty there. So all they could see was that Muslims were asking for help from someone who's dead, and then for Wahhabi, that is devoid of anything supernatural on the part of the dead one. And for the Wahhabi, confirming anything supernatural on the part of that dead one is just worshiping him. So they're very twisted here. It's bad, this very, very poisonous heresy, very bad. Because someone gets tainted with this mistake here, he might not come out of it. حتى لو قال قائل يا محمد صار عندهم كافرا. Even if someone said, oh Muhammad, then to them he became a blasphemer. وكذا لو قال قائل يا رسول الله المدد. Likewise, had a sayer said, O Messenger of Allah, help. صار كافرا عندهم. He became a blasphemer according to them. وهؤلاء جاهلون بمعنى العبادة في لغة العرب. Those are ignorant about the meaning of worship in the language of the Arabs. قال الليث وهو إمام من أئمة اللغة. Al-Layth said, and he is a forerunning leader in the language. متقدم ويقال للمشركين هم عبدة الطاغوت أي الشيطان ويقال للمسلمين عباد الله يعبدون الله. He said, it is said about the pagans that they are devil worshippers, and it is said about the Muslims that they are God worshippers. وقال الله عز وجل, and Allah, the Almighty and Great, said, اعبدوا ربكم. This is still the quote. Worship your Lord. أي أطيعوا ربكم, meaning obey him. Worship though, obey him in the utmost meaning to worship him. Believe in him, yani. أطيعوا ربكم, believe in him by worshiping him because he's God. وقوله إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين is saying what means you we worship and from you we seek help. أي نطيع الطاعة التي يخضع معها. It means we obey with the obedience that has incorporated in it the humility, meaning the ultimate humility. انتهى, end quote. وقال ابن أثير, Ibn al-Athir said, والعبادة في اللغة طاعة مع الخضوع. Ibn al-Athir said, worship in the language, ibadah in the language is the obedience with the humility. وفي المصباح للفيومي أحد مشاهير اللغويين, and in the book, the dictionary Al-Misbah by Al-Fayyumi, one of the famous linguists, he says there, عبدت الله أعبده عبادة وهي الانقياد والخضوع. He says, the past tense form is abada, with the fatha on the ba, abada. So you would say, abadtullaha, I worshipped Allah. And the present tense form is a'budu, with a dhamma on the ba, a'budu. So you would say, a'buduhu, I worship him. And then the masdar, the source, someone might say the gerund, is ibadah, worship. وهي الانقياد والخضوع. It is the submission and the humility. وفي تاج العروس شرح القاموس للحافظ اللغوي محمد مرتضى الزبيدي. And in Taj al-Arus, the explanation of Al-Qamus by Hafiz and linguist Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi, وَالْعِبَادَةُ بِالْكَسْرِ الطَّاعَةِ. He says, worship, al-ibadah, with the kasra on the ayn, al-ibadah, it means the obedience, the utmost obedience. Not any obedience. That's why he has L on there. So if someone doesn't have enough to fill in there, he doesn't see what he means. At-ta'a, the obedience. So what happens? Say, there's right there. What are you talking about? He said it right there, obedience. So let it be known that this L there, that's for meaning the ultimate example of that, the obedience. And let's stop there.